Today I will be talking about Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard was a theologian, a scholar of scripture, an eloquent speaker, an advisor of popes, and a reformer of a monastic order, among other things. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux was born in 1090 at Fontaines, near Dijon, France, and died in Clairvaux, France, in August 1153. Though the cause of his death is not explicitly stated, it was said that he could sense it coming at the start of the year he died. Bernard was known to have suffered from impaired health for most of his life, so it is likely that he died due to illness. On January 18, 1174, Bernard of Clairvaux was canonized by Alexander III. In Roman Catholic Church, canonization is when a deceased person is declared a saint. His feast day is August 20th. The picture featured on this slide is of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux was born to members of the highest nobility of Burgundy, the Lord of Fontaines, Tesselin, and Aleth of Montbard. He was one of 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl. Before Bernard was born, a devout man foretold his great destiny, so his parents made sure to take care educating Bernard. He was sent to a distinguished school at Châtillon-sur-Seine at 9 years old. Growing up, he took great interest in literature and focused on poetry for some time. Bernard wished to excel in literature so he could study sacred scripture. He was very successful in all of his studies, earning admiration from his masters. Bernard's mother was a very influential person in his life, and when she died around his 19 years of age, it provoked his long path to complete conversion. Bernard feared being snared by the temptations of the world and decided to turn to a life of religious discipline. Soon after his mother's death, Bernard and about 30 others he persuaded to join him, including his own brothers, joined the Cistercian community. The Cistercian order is a Roman Catholic monastic order founded in 1098 that believed in manual work and a simple life far removed from the rest of society. They also believed in asceticism, the practice of denying physical or psychological desires in order to attain a spiritual ideal or goal. The Cistercian Brotherhood was a movement of reform that wished to embrace a more faithful observance of the rule of Saint Benedict, the father of Western monasticism. The Cistercian order was amongst the smallest, poorest, and most recently founded. He was a novice of great passion and intensity, and made his profession after a year. 3 years after joining the Cistercians, Bernard was sent to lead a group of monks to establish a monastery at Clairvaux, and was appointed abbot, the superior of a monastic community. The beginnings of the abbey of Clairvaux were trying and difficult. The austere regime was so severe that Bernard's health was affected, worsening the impaired health he suffered from for most of his life. The monastery progressed quickly, gaining so much popularity that bands had to be sent out to find new houses because there was not enough room for everyone. Bernard himself gained a lot of popularity as well, and was often called upon by various religious officials to advise, settle disputes, and more. Disciples and monks flocked to the abbey and to St. Bernard wanting to follow him. Bernard was called upon by Pope Honorius II in 1128 to attend the Council of Troyes to assist with settling conflicts within the French Church. His suggestions offended the cardinals, and they denounced him, and they said he was nothing more than a meddling monk. However, Cardinal Harmeric and the papal court took interest in his words, leading to a bond between Bernard and the Pope. Bernard was often away from his cloister due to his travels and political work. He was constantly seeking to find a balance between the interior life of prayer that consisted of praying, reflecting, and writing, and the outward life of prayer, consisting of teaching, preaching, and political work. This is a theme that is apparent in many of his works. Bernard was very outspoken about his beliefs and his criticisms of others. Whenever he believed a person was hurting the church or did not have the church in his best interest, he made sure it was known. He was a renowned churchman who corrected abuses within the faith and defended church rights. Saint Bernard was a very accomplished man. He wrote multiple works, assisted priests, popes, and other religious officials, and did so many other things during his lifetime that earned him recognition both during life and after. Some of his accomplishments include being the founder and abbot of the Abbey of Clairvaux, being declared a saint, being the first Cistercian monk placed on the calendar of saints, being given the title of Doctor of the Church, founding about 163 Cistercian monasteries in Europe, and more. He was also offered several bishoprics but refused all of them. The Abbey of Clairvaux is shown in the picture below. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux wrote many works throughout his lifetime. On the Steps of Humility and Pride was his first book, and it expanded on the teachings of Saint Benedict's rule regarding humility and communal living. He talks about man's spiritual ascent through love of self and neighbor to the love of God in his treatise on loving God. He had many works, including sermons, treatises, letters, and scriptural commentaries. All of his works have and continue to provide spiritual insight and renewal. The works I had you read for today are excerpts from the Apologia and part of the second book of On Consideration. Other works of his are listed on this slide. I had you read excerpts from Bernard's Apologia because I think it helps to understand Cistercian beliefs and what Bernard preached. Bernard was a chief spokesman for the ways and values of the Cistercians. Written in 1125, the Apologia regards the controversy between the Cistercian order and the Cluniac order. The Cluniacs were more indulgent in their ways, having excesses in food, clothing, and buildings, which went against Cistercian beliefs. Cistercians believed in living austere, disciplined lives removed from society, and so they criticized the Cluniacs. William the Abbot of St. Thierry asked Bernard to write something to defend the Cistercians against charges of slandering the Cluniacs, but still continue to criticize them, resulting in the Apologia. Bernard argues that indulging in luxuries is not true love and is cruel because it looks after the body but neglects the soul. I find it interesting that this work is called an apology, yet there does not seem to be any apologizing going on. Instead, Bernard is criticizing the Cluniac order and is pushing the beliefs of the Cistercian order on them. From 1147 to 1149 CE, the Second Crusade took place. The Second Crusade was a military campaign formally called for by Pope Eugenius III on December 1st, 1145 CE, for the purpose of freeing the Latin East from Muslim occupation and recapturing the city of Edessa in Mesopotamia. Edessa had fallen to the Muslim Seljuk Turks in 1144 CE. This campaign was unsuccessful and caused further tensions with the Byzantine Empire and the West. There were also significant campaigns in the Iberian Peninsula and the Baltic against Muslim Moors and pagan Europeans. These secondary campaigns were mostly successful, but the main goal of freeing Latin East from the threat of Muslim occupation remained unaccomplished. The crusade was led by Conrad III, the King of Germany, and Louis VII, the King of France. Support for the Second Crusade was raised by the promise to Christians who joined that their sins would be remissioned even if they died during the journey. Also, the properties and families of those who joined would be protected while they were away, and matters such as interest on loans would be postponed or canceled. The Second Crusade ended in failure due to poor leadership, disagreements, and lack of discipline among troops, just to name a few. The picture on this slide is of Pope Eugenius III. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux played an important role in the Second Crusade. Pope Eugenius III, who was one of Bernard's disciples, appointed Bernard as the chief promoter of the crusade. Pope Eugenius III was a monk at the Abbey of Clairvaux for 10 years, and Bernard was the one to recommend him for higher church positions that he himself was offered but refused. They were very close, and Bernard had great influence over Pope Eugenius III. Bernard traveled Europe preaching the crusade at the Pope's request, encouraging people to support and join, and had great success in his doings. He provoked great enthusiasm for the crusade in numerous populations. During his preachings, he asked the knights to arm themselves and wear the cross to show that they were God's warriors, and even made crosses for them from his own clothing. In his treatise in praise of the new knighthood, Bernard claimed that it is right to fight for Christ and that dying and killing for the sake of Christ was not a sin. Bernard stated, "I do not mean to say that the pagans are to be slaughtered when there is any other way to prevent them from harassing and persecuting the faithful, but only that it now seems better to destroy them than that the rod of the sinners be lifted over the lot of the just, and the righteous perhaps put forth their hands into iniquity." Despite his seemingly full support of the crusade and fighting and killing for the sake of Christ, Bernard did enforce boundaries on clerical participation in the activities of the crusade. Monks had to have authorization to preach in any context and were punished if they violated this. Bernard himself pursued the monk Ralph, who preached crusade sermons without authorization and incited violence against Jews in Germany. Any monks that joined the Second Crusade were chastised and excommunication was threatened. Bernard was nominated by the Council of Charters to lead the crusade himself, but he refused. It is interesting that though Bernard believed monks should not join the crusade and would not take an active part in it himself, he still advocated for it and encouraged others to join. Bernard claimed the Crusaders would achieve glorious victory, and when the Second Crusade ended in failure, much of the blame was placed upon him. The picture on this slide depicts Saint Bernard preaching during the Second Crusade. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux wrote the treatise on consideration in 1150, and it is addressed to Pope Eugenius III. The treatise includes 5 books and talks about combining the contemplative spirit with responsibility and care, and also talks about how the reformation of the Church starts with the sanctity of the Pope. It can be looked at as a book of guidance and advice. Chapter 1 of the second book in the Treatise on Consideration is an apology to the Pope for the failure of the Second Crusade. I had you read this work because I thought that St. Bernard's advocacy for the Second Crusade and the blame that was placed on him for its failure was a significant part in his life. In the apology, Bernard defended himself, claiming that he was following the commands of God in preaching the crusade and even used biblical precedents, the Hebrews' suffering in the book of Exodus and their defeats at the hands of the tribe of Benjamin, as supporting evidence to do so. Bernard claimed that the sins of the Crusaders were to blame for this failure of the crusade, and other Cistercian writers claimed this as well. He stated that he is content to take the criticism of the people so that God doesn't have to. Like the Apologia, this apology also fails to truly be an apology. Bernard defends himself, denying his responsibility for the Crusade's failure, blames others for it instead, and then goes on to make himself seem like this righteous man willing to take the blame and criticism so that people do not turn their hatred towards God. Here are some discussion questions to think about. What are your thoughts on St. Bernard's Apologia? What did this work reveal about him? What do you think of St. Bernard of Clairvaux's apology for the failure of the Second Crusade? What do you think it reveals about him? Why do you think he was blamed? Why do you think St. Bernard wrote these apologies? Do you think these apologies were necessary? Do you think they were really apologies? Saint Bernard of Clairvaux appeared to be very controversial and outspoken, yet still praised by many, held in high regard by even those above him, and very influential. What are your thoughts on him as a person? This slide contains the sources I used for this presentation. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and learned something new. Thank you for your time.